Ladies, gentlemen, and friends beyond the binary, welcome to the Monday Discourse for today, October 12th, 2020. Hello, everybody. That is coffee. Gonna need it. It was, woke up a bit too early this morning. Anyways, hi, my name is Tristan Johnson. I'm the host of YouTube's Step Back History, and I stream, for some reason, 3 times a week. What you're watching right now is the Monday Discourse, where I talk about things that are going on the internet, typically with my co-host Mia Mulder, but she's unfortunately ill, so there will not be stream today, or with her. But typically it goes from 12 to 2, and, Eastern time, so if you have, a thing to work out how that schedule works, then work it out. I also stream on Monday night, or on Tuesday nights, I do a stream called Step Back Tonight, which is sort of a more chill and relaxing stream that happens from 7 to 10. And The Reactor, which is a stream I do on Fridays from 2 to 5, where people send me content and we watch it together and react to it. I go by he, him pronouns, and my work can be found at stepbackhistory.com or tristanwon'tshutup.com or TristanPJ on Twitter. And one thing is for the people who are watching on Twitch, if you Twitch watcher, have an Amazon Prime account, then I would recommend that you use your free Twitch Prime subscription every month to support an independent creator. And, you can support anybody, and I'd be happy, because independent creators on Twitch don't have money. Amazon has all the money. Amazon is just going to become a, monopolistic, monopolistic conglomerate that takes over the entire world. So if you can take a little bit of that money and give it to an independent Twitch creator, it'd be really awesome. If you choose Step Back, I'll be very appreciative. I have cats to feed, I have bills to pay, and you doing that helps me justify spending 8 hours a week streaming, and keeps the show going. If you're looking for kind of like where I am on my content, my latest Tristan Won't Shut Up video is about planned economies and why they are good, using Walmart as an example. And my latest Step Back video is on Emma Goldman. Now, as far as like my next project, I have lots of projects in the go, but I have 2 videos that are currently at different stages of creation. The next Tristan Won't Shut Up video is the closest to being done. It's about, it's being titled The Trolling Industrial Complex. And right now I'm just editing the video. I did a bunch of editing yesterday, and, editing is a slow process. I'm trying to give it a bit more, I'm trying to zhuzh it up a little bit so that you can, so it's less boring, so it has kind of a better pace to it. So that, inshallah, will be done tomorrow. Hoping. We'll see how my time goes. My time is split like 4 ways right now. But if I can finish it tomorrow, that would be sweet, and then I could release it on Wednesday. But I'm hoping against hope to get it out this week. And the next Step Back video, I will be possibly filming tomorrow, which is also crazy. The script I finished on Sunday, so now I have a script for the video. I'll be filming it. Tomorrow, or hopefully filming it tomorrow, and then I'll be working on the editing process. So it might be earlier in the month. I might have actually found a sponsor for this video at the last second, and we'll see if I can arrange that. But otherwise, it's moving along. And then besides that, I'm working on some stuff for the relaunch of the Armchair Historian, and writing scripts for the Cold War. So, the usual stuff. That's why, I'm split between, 4 projects that are all in different stages of development right now. Life is great. Life is really fun right now. I've decided to add another work day to my week, so now I work on Saturdays. So that's all my things, as far as I know. So let's see what's going on in the chat. Laser Samurai, hello. It's your girl. First time you were here before me. Well, that's nice. Matt's only gonna be here for an hour. Cool. Would you rather live in real 1999 or 1967's imaginary 1999? I'm trying to remember what... Okay, so 1999, Tristan was 10 or 11, which, decent time to be alive for the most part. Learning from home would have been fun. all of the disposable shit. I have a feeling that it would be enjoyable for me as a white man who was a child living in that, but the disposable stuff and everything like that was like, ugh, no, let's not. All right. Means TV shirt, awesome. Hope Mia recovers quickly. Me too. How do you feel about terrible industries corporatizing? Like you were talking about how destructive cruise ships were the other day. Suppose all the workers at a failing cruise line wanted to buy the company and turn it into a cooperative. Would you support them, or would you just be like, no, just let it fail and get the jobs that don't harm the planet? I mean, I would say good for you, but also, like, maybe I feel like under a cooperative ownership, maybe they would be more incentivized to turn an industry that sucks into one that doesn't suck. But I'd be saying both at the same time. I'd be like, hey, it's good that cooperatives are happening. It's also not good that the cruise industry is continuing, is all. I would say that, like, what's it called? That's one of those industries that would never turn into a cooperative because the profit margins on those things are so thin that you really have to run like you have to run a corporation like a despot in order for it to even be functional. Like, so much of the cruise industry is like just like only able to turn a profit because they like flagrantly abuse labor laws in different countries and stuff like that, and like weird maritime laws and things. Cruise ships, like those mega cruise ships, are, first of all, a whole bunch of them are just being scrapped right now because the cruise industry is basically dying. But I have a feeling that we're gonna like remember cruise ships as like the peak of like neoliberal excess. They'll be like, yeah, there was this period in history where people were starving to death, and instead of doing anything about it, and also they were burning fuel that was destroying the atmosphere, that was making their planet uninhabitable. And instead of trying to fix those things, they had an ideology called capitalism, which made them think that it was good to make huge like cities on that are on boats that destroy the environment more, like are just like absolutely one of the most environmentally destructive things on Earth, and at the same time used exclusively to get rich people, to have rich people be able to get drunk on the sea. Yeah, history will not look back kindly on them. Oh, and also they spread the plague constantly, even before the Great Plague that killed them. Okay. You know Rutger Bregman, the Dutch guy who told off Tucker Carlson. In one of his books, he asserts that cargo containers are the second most impactful invention of the 20th century, the transistor being first. Because without them, it probably wouldn't have been practical to outsource manufacturing. Thoughts on that take? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. The cargo container thing, like the containerization of cargo, basically destroyed the entire job of being a longshoreman. What would have taken a team of people, would have required a large team of unionized and well-paid workers, turned into a dude with a crane. And the lack of need for longshoremen has basically made the costs of getting things on and off of ships go way, way, way down, to the point where it actually becomes profitable to make something on the other side of the Pacific Ocean and then put it on a boat and send it to the Americas where it can be sold at a markup. And have that be a cheaper option than just making them in the country, which is huge. And yeah, that's a huge economic impact on society. And yeah, up with the transistor and birth control as like some of the huge things that really redefined society in the 20th century. Happy Thanksgiving. Not sure what Thanksgiving is about, but at least it's a stat day. Yeah, I don't... What's it called? Most Canadians wouldn't be able to tell you. I couldn't even tell you what Canadian Thanksgiving is about. And all of the rituals and stuff that we have associated with Thanksgiving are just stolen from American Thanksgiving. So, it's a whole thing. Like, we had our to us, Thanksgiving is the same. It's getting together with your family and eating turkey. Which, like, you know, is a thing you can't even do this year because of COVID anyway, so. What do you think of the theory Harris is going to be the power behind the throne when Biden wins? I think it's needlessly optimistic, honestly. Are you going to stand at a dumpster? Hey, look, it's Phoebe. Everybody, be happy. There's a Phoebe here. Look how happy she is. Zizek it up. Are you going to stand in a dumpster at one point? Maybe. How do you... The main thing that I'm doing to sort of like zhizh up my videos is I saw this thing about how television works. Specifically about how like television like editors do their stuff. And one of the conclusions they came to was that people like to keep pace, to keep a good pace going. A lot of TV editors want to have something visually change, either going to a different clip or changing to a different camera about every 2 to 7 seconds. That's like the average on television. And so I'm trying in my latest video to have something so that there is some sort of change every 7 seconds. That's the hope. That's what I'm working on right now. As you can imagine, that means a whole lot more cuts and a whole lot more like graphics and stuff like that in videos, which will make them more interesting to look at. Now, you guys are all watching streams right now, which are sort of like the opposite of like keeping that content really tight and punchy, but that's kind of the thing I'm trying to do. How do you feel about trying to put modern political messages into historical fiction? A while back I read a Roman novel, and I'm pretty sure the author was using Rome as a stand-in for the American Empire and the Persians as like ISIS or Al-Qaeda. I mean, I don't care for the most part. Like, as long as it's a compelling story, that if that's a setting that you need to use to convey an idea, to be like sort of a metaphor for another thing, then go for it. I mean, it's already non-historical by the fact that the characters are speaking in English, and like the analysis is like, what's it called? If you were to make an actual story based on people the way they actually thought at the time, no historical fiction would be even like, you would not even be able to, how do I explain it? You wouldn't even be able to understand the motivations of the characters in any actually factually accurate historical fiction, because people in the past have a culture and a disposition that often feels like it's from a different like planet, let alone like the past. And so in some sense, to make any story compelling, you basically have to concede a good chunk of like modernizing the story, or else it'll just not make any sense to you. And you know me, I've said this. I'll take story over lore any time of day. And if something makes sense story-wise and makes less sense because it violates the lore, or it involves like a stretching of the lore, which I guess in historical fiction, history is the lore, then I'm fine with it. I prefer a better story than a accurate story. Like, what's it called? One of the best historical fiction movies that I've seen ends with them killing Hitler in a movie theater, so I don't know. Thanksgiving, good or bad? I mean, I enjoy it. I don't know if Canadian Thanksgiving has the same association with the destruction of Indigenous society as the American one does, but probably does. Everything about... But so far, I'm like, okay. Oh, you're working with Armchair Historian now. Well, they're making a new site that is going to be like a streaming platform with exclusive content for history YouTubers. And they've asked me to commission some videos. So I'm putting together a commissioned video for them this month. In a cashless, moneyless society, would sex work work? Oh, this is a reference to the comfort women but make it communist conversation that was happening on Twitter this weekend. My hope is that in a cashless, moneyless society, that sex would be decommoditized. And so, what would sex work be if you decommoditized sex? I don't know. At that point, it's just free love, isn't it? But that's where I'd be. But like in our current society, sex work is most definitely work. And sex work isn't always, having sex. There's different industries. There's pornography. There's a bunch. And so I feel like straight up like sex work might not be a thing in a post-capitalist society, but not because it's been like morally shamed out of existence or whatever. Because yeah, it's hard to imagine sex work functioning if sex was decommoditized in any way that doesn't sound like you're talking about comfort women, which let's not do that. Hey, Phoebe. Working Saturdays ain't kosher. I'm not Jewish, so it's alright. Clean yo room. Talking about... I refuse. This is like a bunch of shit that I still haven't dealt with from moving in like 2 months ago or 3 months ago or... Oh god, it's a while ago now, wasn't it? It was like 3 months ago. Phoebe's already looking at me disappointedly. And this isn't my room, this is my office. Can we make cruises sustainable? Unless we invent... the thing is, I don't think we have an electric engine that is powerful enough to move a cruise ship, as far as I can tell. We're either too far away when it comes to battery technology or engine technology to make something like that possible. And I feel like if we could, we'd probably already have electric airplanes by now, and we do not. Or we don't have like electric airliners like we would need. Why does Canada celebrate Thanksgiving? Like, Thanksgiving seems distinctly American and tied to the Pilgrims. If Canada files those parts off, I don't know. Canadian Thanksgiving, I think, has had several different incarnations as to like what its point is. Like, we have a lot of cultural influence from the United States, but also, like, if I remember correctly, Canadian Thanksgiving has changed dates several times in our history, and the reasoning for it has changed several times as well. Like, there was a point where Thanksgiving was on a certain day to celebrate the King of England getting over an illness or something like that. But I think it's different now. And I think also, like, in the Trudeau years, they just, like, changed it to just be this day because it's, like, a day that we're going to do and doesn't really have a purpose behind it anymore. Thoughts about the idea of a transitionary state. The other day I watched an ANCOM breadtuber argue that being an anarchist means you're not necessarily against the idea of setting up a state that will slowly transition to stateless communism like Marx originally argued for. Yeah, what's it called? That extremely terrible Xander Hall clip has been going around the internet, has been making its rounds, about how Xander Hall is like, I want to make a market capitalist state as a transition towards anarchism, and I was like, this is a really fucking dumb take. Okay. But I mean, like, Marxist-Leninists would say that a transitionary state is good, but I would say that because of the way that power functions, by like its like, I don't think that a state would jive with human nature super great. Like, we obviously, and there's like, psychological studies to back this up, that human beings are kind of addicted to hierarchy, that we kind of always have to be fighting against. And we need, and like having a state is basically just for the purposes of the ease of not having to do things democratically, creating an organization that makes people's decisions for them, which creates a hierarchy and creates a power structure that it's almost impossible for human beings to not abuse, just because it's so addictive, and our brains are so pre-programmed to want power and status so badly. So in my mind, I don't think that a transitionary state is a good idea, because just like what happened with the Soviet Union, sure, you can call it a transitionary state, but all it's going to do, as states do, is centralize power and create more and more hierarchy before, their eventual demise. So I don't think it's going to be a thing that works. Aren't cargo ships really polluting? Yeah. Cargo ships have, like, they use a certain type of oil that is, like, extremely dense, so that it floats on water easier or something. I don't remember exactly what the reason is. But the oil that goes into into a ship, a freighter ship, is very thick, and it's not very refined. So when they burn it, it releases like something like 4 times the amount of carbon if the exact same amount of fuel had been burned in of gasoline, for example. You have to think about like fuel as like, they take petrol, right? Like they take like raw shit out of the ground, which is like this thick black substance. And then to turn it into fuels that are used in cars and stuff like that, they distill it. They have like all these like, refining plants where they have to turn raw crude oil into various fuels. And basically what they'll do is they'll burn it in this like chamber where there's like different shelves all the way up. And like the lower down it is, the sludgier it is, to the point where like the actual bottom stuff is called coke. Which is, so I don't even remember what coking is used for anymore. It's basically just like a waste product, I think. But then like at the bottom, you got the kind of shit that goes into like ships. And then you got like kind of upper things. You got like gasoline, which can function in slightly smaller engines because it doesn't have as much like, random particles and shit like that. So the stuff that's lower down tends to be cheaper, but it also tends to have like more like minerals and shit in it, which like is easier to deal with if you have an engine that's like the size of a house, like you'd find inside of like a ship, like a freighting ship. While like gasoline is much more clean, so that it has to be a lot more distilled. That's a lot more of that shit taken out of it, so that it can run in like an engine-sized engine like a car. And then when you get to the more like thin stuff at the top, it's like kerosene and stuff like that that's used in like lamps and like to cook with and stuff like that. So there's your little oil facts today. I'm sure a lot of people already knew that, but if you didn't, now you do. Could you convert a cruise ship into some form of public housing, like dock it and convert it into a giant floating housing block and community center? I mean, you could, except the fact is, like, a lot of the housing and infrastructure on a cruise ship kind of suck. Like, a lot of the cruise ships don't even have like, the quarters don't even have windows. They have, like, digital windows. So a lot of people would not want to live in a place that doesn't even have a window. But I mean, that'd be better than having no house at all. So I would take it. But I'm sure, like, yeah, it could be used as like infrastructure and stuff like that. But I feel like there's more efficient ways to have people live in close quarters than a cruise ship. But at least you'd have one, I suppose. Thoughts on the... already answered that question. Do you think that some quirky stereotypes exist in medieval times, like in Byzantium? Would there be basic Byzantine girls going crazy over the Kiev and Rus yoga or something? I mean, there always is going to be those kinds of things because our brains tend towards heuristics about things that we... of categories that are not us. And so we always tend to lump people into these things. One example was like Germans in the the Byzantine Empire was Roman, but back when Rome still had like Rome in it, there was this idea that Germans were like, fierce, monstrous giants to the north, and that things associated with them would be considered barbaric, and one of those things was growing a mustache. And so sometimes, as like a way for like the kids to be defiant against their parents, they would grow a mustache to sort of like flaunt Roman values back at them or something like that. And so it's like always like there's always things getting built up like that for sure. What's it called? Romans also used to think that people who lived in like Sudan didn't have heads and that their faces were on their stomach. So yeah, those kinds of things always did exist. Isn't Thanksgiving technically glorifying genocide because of how U.S. settlers treated Native Americans? This is true in America, but ours has sort of like had all of its pilgrims dinner. Like in the past, a feast of Thanksgiving was a thing that like happened because it would usually be like a feast of like when something good happened, you would have a feast of Thanksgiving. Now it's been sort of just standardized into one holiday. And I think in general, Canadian Thanksgiving is more focused around being sort of a harvest festival type thing. So, I don't know, it's had a lot of its, like, settler colonialism filed off in a way that in America it has not. Let's see. In a world of cooperatives, would free trade and multinational cooperation be beneficial? Yeah, it would just be like a form of mutual aid rather than like right now where it is a straight up like form of exploitation. Like right now, if you think about like under capitalism, if you think about like, hey, Tacitus, thank you for following. Welcome to the Orc King. If you think of like the process of how economics works, how the supply chain works in a capitalist society, you sort of like have value being added all the way up on the food chain. And so those on the lowest end of the food chain are the ones who are usually the worst off. So that's like primary resource extraction. Then you have manufacturing, which is sort of in the middle. And then you have service above that and finance above that. And yeah, so like richer countries tend to have more of a service/finance economy. While, like, middle-tier countries have, like, manufacture, because like those are the ones where they're using the most value, the most highly valued items at its like highest rate, with little to no overhead. While like manufacturing, you have to have like an entire factory to make stuff, and then for a mine or something like that, it can be very expensive and very cost prohibitive to start it. And so like the entire thing is like this vertically integrated system of exploiting poorer and poorer countries all the way down the line, with people, intermediaries of exploitation all the way up. And if you had a cooperative, or if you dealt with like getting rid of capitalism, if you had like a corporation that had factories and mines and service, and everybody who worked at every single part of that food chain was a owner of the company and was a cooperative, then in the end, you wouldn't have that distinction. You wouldn't have that like the mine workers are paid less than the factory workers, because you would just need to supersede the sort of like getting around minimum wage laws that a lot of these things are doing. Wouldn't you be better as a middle-class white guy in both versions of 1999? I suppose so, yeah. Should we reinterpret ancient events coded into specific narratives? For example, the Persian Wars are often lauded as East-West fight, but why not see it as Greek anti-colonial movement? Well, that's the thing, is that very often when we... like the idea of the Persian Wars being an East-West fight, that is also a reinterpretation from a different age. That is a reinterpretation from like the Victorian age that sort of saw West and East as fundamentally different societies, while seeing it as an anti-colonial movement is also like kind of like a modernizing view of it. Like that's the thing, is this is kind of the topic of the video I'm working on for Step Back right now, is that there's no real such thing as apolitical history. We are always interpreting the past with the lenses and the issues and the narratives that we have today. And so we're always going to be reinterpreting it with a present lens. That's just sort of a fact of how history works. And so how you tell a story matters quite a bit. And I'm not saying lie or be to be like counterfactual, but because that is fraud and that is bad. That is when you get into like being Dinesh D'Souza territory. But like interpretation is always going to be done by the time of the person who wrote it. There's no like objective way. Objectivity is sort of like an impossible standard to hit in history, because you can't really run experiments. You can't know facts about the past. You can't know facts about the American Revolution that are as sure and as not as objective as like saying that we know the gravitational constant or something like that, because one can be tested with experimentation and one cannot. And that means that we have to have a completely different way of understanding the way that we do things. Wouldn't it be better from a historical perspective to make the characters act like as they would at the time? Sure, Distron, that could be the case. Just like no one would read it because it would make no sense. Like people, like if you were to write Roman historical fiction that was about like I'll say like a Roman legionary or something like that, you would not be able to empathize or connect with the story at all, because their motivations would be so alien to you, and like would be like they grew up in a completely different culture that like would be absolutely foreign to the way that your brain works, and so the story wouldn't be that compelling, because yeah, time does that. But so if you want historical fiction to be a thing that is real, that people actually read and have an interest in, you have to kind of modernize it to some extent. What will happen, unfortunately, is that people will say, well, he did the research, but all the characters still act with modern sensibilities. So I'm just going to assume that this is how people thought in the past, which is not true. And so so if you try to like, wrap yourself up in like, oh no, I want my historical fiction to be objective, what you're going to do is find out things that are modern reinterpretations that fit your own concept of what the past was like, so that and then just take that for granted, because yeah, as I said about the thing about like historical nonfiction, what we know about the past is still part of modern interpretation. You can't. There's no such thing as objectivity when it comes to history. And trust me, lots of people have tried, and no one has succeeded. And GF once joked that you are taking over the internet because you keep showing up in the credits or connected on so many things I watch. What? Really? What did I show up in the credits of? Or what was I connected to? I gotta know what these things are. Unless you just happen to be coming across everything that I'm associated with. How did Romans view... Oh, that's not to me. Okay. What were the internal contradictions of feudalism? That feudalism required... feudalism was... Okay, let's... what happened, the kind of contradiction of feudalism is that feudalism was tied to agricultural wealth. Like, the main thing that destroyed feudalism was the moving of the economic structure from one of agricultural economies to manufacturing industrial economies, early industrial economies. Because what was going on was that feudalism, as a concept, was based on the owning of land. Because in an agricultural economy, the more land that you can own, the more power you have. Because really, economic growth is linear and compared directly to how much, farmable land you have access to. While like manufactuaries and stuff like that require more, require just access to cheap primary resources, which are actually preferred to get like from colonies, because colonies you can have less responsibility over, and you don't have to worry about maintaining. And then all you need to own is like one building that can just churn out like manufactured goods. And you can make much more money than a farm without having to have the deed to the county of West Sussex. And so there you go. And so eventually you ended up with a merchant class that owned factories and stuff like that ended up becoming more and more financially powerful compared to a sort of aging aristocracy that still had its wealth through the owning and renting of land. And eventually... there was a power struggle and one won out. Alright, what if you want your occupation to be completely about sex work? Like being a cam person or an escort. Like, how would that work under a decommodified society? Also, I have no clue this convo happened on Twitter. Yeah, there's this whole like discussion that happened on Twitter about sexual mutual aid. That there will be sex work under communism because people will want to have... people who are unattracted to people will still want to have sex with those people as a way to, like, create mutual aid networks and make people feel distressed. It's like one of the... which is basically the thought process behind the creation of comfort women during the occupation of Korea and Japan, by Japan. And everyone was like, that's super fucked up. But, like... yeah, like being a camp person or an escort, for example, like those things could exist under a non-capitalist economy for sure. If it's a thing that you want to do, then you can do that. It just, as long as it's just not tied to money anymore. So that's like a thing. I don't understand why there's like a... I don't understand the distinction. You're not Jewish. Surprised. I know. A lot of people in my comments seem to think that I'm Jewish. Especially the Nazis. So they talk about... I get comments all the time about how people think I'm Jewish, mostly because they're talking about how they want me to die. But that's... You know, that's life of a YouTuber. A couple companies have played around with a sail-assisted cruise ship. Still not great, but that's the opening. Yeah. What about nuclear-powered cruise ships? Oh boy, that's a fucking environmental disaster waiting to happen. So it makes me think that there's some health and safety issues related to taking a nuclear power plant and putting it on a ship. I mean, they do it. They do it with submarines. Submarines can be tend to be nuclear powered because they don't have anywhere to put exhaust. That's how you can make like stealth submarines and ships. But like, yeah, I don't want a what's it called? I don't want a cruise ship with a nuclear reactor on it to capsize. You know, if you know what I mean. You think that, like, what's it called, the Exxon Valdez crashing ashore and spilling oil onto the beach was an environmental disaster. Just wait until, like, you know, the SS Chernobyl fucking sinks, and like you've got radioactive particles in the water for ages. Like you could contaminate like entire coasts of countries with that. Not to mention do like irrevocable damage to like the entire ecosystem because, yeah, radioactive particles. Oh my god. No, you cannot put a nuclear reactor on a ship. Because, like, with a nuclear power plant, when you make a nuclear power plant, you design, like, the entire architecture of a nuclear power plant is designed so that if containment failure happens, it sort of is like its own cement tomb so that radioactive particles can't get out in case of like massive error. If you can't do that on a ship, you imagine if you had like a meltdown at sea? Oh my god, it'd be like one of the worst things. No, Miete. No, she is ill. Is it okay to describe eunuchs in history as a third gender since they often were viewed as not really male and not female in those societies? Interesting factors intersex people were... Yeah, I mean, I made references that, like, yeah, when you talk about... There are several cultures where there was a class of eunuchs that... that sort of had that were sort of treated as had their own, like, if you think about gender as just like the series of expectations and performances one has to do based on like, you know, like categories of society that based on roughly reproductive status, then yeah, eunuchs could be like a distinct third gender, and they have been several times. Like, is it okay? Like, I don't know. Is eunuch really, like, I don't know if eunuch really is like a loaded term or not, to be honest. Because it's a fairly common term used when studying history. What's an example of a black swan invention? Use the term we were talking about, bad predictions in the future last stream. Sure. The fact that fire control systems, like the fact that a computerized network for fire control systems on World War II battleships turned into the biggest communication revolution in human history, i.e. the invention of the internet, is an example of a black swan invention. What's it called? The fact that, like, in America, slavery was starting to become less and less profitable until Eli Whitney found a way to easily separate cotton from its seed and made cotton extremely profitable and brought slavery back in a huge way. But, like, no one expected that to be invented. Those are the kinds... Okay, yeah, I probably should go back and explain what I mean by black swan. So, there's this old term. So, in Europe, for, like, the longest time, like, all through the Middle Ages, a black swan... Because in Europe, all swans are white, right? So a black swan was a term for something that's impossible. Something that is like, like, it just is like a figure of speech. Like, in the Middle Ages, you'd be like, oh yeah, like, what's it called? That, like, this person doing that thing would be like seeing a black swan. Like, it's kind of like when pigs fly, like that kind of a term. Until European explorers discovered that in Australia there are black swans, that they exist. And so the term comes from this book called by, I think his name is Nassim Taleb, who is a economist, and he wrote a book called Black Swans, which are basically trying to say that making grandiose predictions about how things are going to turn out are sort of pointless, because most of the major events in history that shape the past are made by these black swan events, which are basically things that are impossible or near impossible to predict before they happen, but after they happen seem inevitable. A lot of people would say, like, the First World War was an example of, like, a black swan event. And as a technology historian, I've mentioned that, like, a lot of times, like, the way that our society functions was severely affected by black swan inventions, where some sort of new invention becomes developed that completely changes the way that society is structured. And, like, the internet is a pretty good example of one. The internet started as a way to sort of coordinate, to coordinate the firing system. So, like, the ability to fire cannons on a ship so you could hit targets very far away. And they needed to network it between multiple turrets. And so the fire control systems on those ships were eventually developed into communication technology that would change everything. And even then, they didn't know that that was going to change everything. So, like, that's sort of like an example. There might be a less damaging way to extract natural gas, but there's no motivation to do so. Yeah. I mean, we probably shouldn't be, extracting natural gas at this point. Hydrogen-powered aircraft? Ooh, like, yeah, I guess what could go wrong? It's like, what's it called? Yeah. I remember there being a hydrogen-powered aircraft that had quite a dramatic end to its life, called the Hindenburg. There is some talk, though, that maybe the future of air travel in, like, kind of like, once we, like, get over fossil fuels, might be, because if we have to like end fossil fuel consumption before we can develop batteries to the point where we can have electric airliners, we might move back to blimps, because blimps actually require, like, way less fuel to function than an airplane. They're just a lot slower. And so it might be we're going to move to a future where we take blimps around. They're going to be more expensive and slower, but they can be much easier to turn them into, to electrify them than, say, an airplane. All right. What do you think of Indy Nidell's World War II week by week channel? I haven't seen any of it. I remember I saw the World War I series he did, and I was like, I thought it was all right. I'm sure it's decent content. Have you read the David Graeber, David Winslow article on early societies? Sort of dispels both Hobbes and Rousseau's takes on early societies. Plus, it's kind of optimistic on democratic societies. No, I haven't seen that. Does tribalism exist, or is it just libs thinking the artificial divides, hierarchies, societies placed between us are like natural part of our psychology? Does tribalism exist, or is it just libs thinking that artificial divides, hierarchical societies placed between us are like a natural part of our psychology? There's tribalism, I don't know. Hierarchies, it seems like there is some aspect to think that that hierarchies might be some sort of like atavistic trait that we hang on to for some reason or another, that has shown through, like, you know, different psychological studies and things like that, and that, like, you can see in sort of some practices. Like, we lived in a state of what's called primitive communism for a very long time, where there was not really that much hierarchy or that much work to do, and so a lot of people, this kind of pre-farming people. And what you see in societies that still live like that, that there is, like, active efforts to try and do stuff. Like, there's, like, a whole thing called shaming the meat, which is that, like, in, like, a hunter-gatherer society, there's, like, this cultural instinct to never praise a hunter for the size of their kill. No matter how big it is, no matter how impressive it is, to always say, oh, like, wow, look at this tiny piece of shit. Okay, thanks for getting it back. Because they don't want them to get egos. And that, like, there's, like, a lot of, like, social structures in these societies meant to actively try and check people from, like, getting egos or thinking themselves better than others or anything like that. And which makes me think that, like, to have, like, our kind of, like, functioning anarchism, we are going to have to be on constant vigil against sort of this this base hierarchical impulse that probably comes from, like, our, you know, very, like, our ape ancestors or something like that. Hopefully that's not the case. Like, if that's just socialization, I would be also pretty happy, but who knows. Hi from Netherlands. Hello. Thank you, Noam Chomsky, for following. And Paulev. And Cloud the Angel. The bottom of a distillation column is like tar and coke. Coke is sometimes used in steel furnaces and steel production. Oh, there you go. What do you think of the demographic replacement of native Europeans in their homelands? It's not a thing? Or if it is a thing, it doesn't matter. And the people who are having sort of like histrionic freakouts about it are usually just racist reactionaries. So that's my take. Hey, Zane, thank you for the $5 super chat. Sorry I got to it so late. If the U.S. went into civil war, would Canada accept refugees or attack? I think that we'd probably accept refugees, but not as many as we should. That'd be my take. Appreciated. Thank you for the $5. Keeping the machine running. You just bought the cats 2 days of food. Let's see. Shifts have been used as dorms by a few schools over the years. Oh, that's cool. I keep wanting to write this alternate history timeline where in the 1950s we discover a portal to an alternate Earth a few hundred kilometers above the North Pole that would give us a way to actually visit another world with the space tech we have and not have it take years Do you think we'd be doing more stuff in space today if something like that existed? Probably. It depends upon what the other alternate Earth would be like. If there's like a way to make money by exploiting the other side, like if there's like no humans there, it's just like a, another Earth that just has like infinite resources or something, then yeah, probably would be. Or if they needed to, or if it was new land for them to paint and say mine on, then that's another thing that would make them do it. In anarchist utopia, what prevents charismatic individuals from using other individuals that admire domineering individuals to gain power of society? My hope is that there's no such thing as anarchist utopia, but that we would all be raised from a young age to be skeptical of people who are charismatic and people who are trying to get other people to follow them. And that we would always be critical of people who claim to want to do something like that. And that kind of like a big part of society would be on constant vigil for people who are trying to become archons. And so like that would be my take, is that like it would require constant vigilance. Yeah. All right. Imagine being an edgy by growing a mustache instead of wearing a Che shirt. The Romans had feasts like that every other day. There you go. Thoughts on Canadian Heritage Minutes? I mean, some of them are good. They're like legit, like I think they're legit entertaining, and I think they're interesting. They are kind of designed to make Canada look good for the most part, and make Canadians patriotic, and I don't like patriotism at all. I think it's gross, so there's that. Like the one where, there's an old one where it frames the, like, wanton, like, devastation that happened to Chinese bodies to build the railroads as, like, some sort of, like, point of pride. And it's like, no, that was, like, fucked up, and we should not ever think that way. Love your channel. Thank you, Tacitus. Once when I was in 6th form college, I saw a girl get slapped on the arse by a boy. She pretended to find it funny. I asked her after. So the group wouldn't think that she was no fun. I told the lecturer, hoping he'd discipline the boy, but he just said, I'd tell her to stand up for herself in the future. Was I partly culpable in that lecturer re-victimizing her because I didn't ask her permission before I made the report? I think you did the right thing. That teacher is the one who's in the wrong. That teacher sounds like he sucks. Because, like, yeah, you should, what's it called? That's sort of like, that teacher is sort of assuming that women should just expect sexual harassment, and that they should just learn how to accept it with good humor, or to fight back against it, when they should be learning. You should be teaching people not to do sexual harassment. Did camp followers still exist in the Civil War era? In Roman times, armies were followed around by camps of traitors. That is possibly how they got away with not giving them adequate rations. Maybe? I know they existed during the American Revolution, but I don't know about the Civil War. I've been marathoning your content lately. My friend Trekkie69 is studying to become an anarchist historian with an MD. Really like your content a lot. Thank you, Skylar. I hope you're enjoying the content. Suppose you work at a cooperative and find out one of your co-workers has been making YouTube videos where he complains about feminism and Black Lives Matter. Would you want to vote to fire that person? Should being a shitlord be a fireable offense? I mean, being a, unless the person is, like, actively hurting other people, I would be, like, as a civil libertarian, I would say that I would have issues with a workplace sort of, unless, like, it's something really, really awful, like, what's it called? Policing what people do when they're not working. I find that makes me inherently uncomfortable, because that is a thing that's happening more and more in our society. but somebody who's like a reactionary who's like trying to drum up hatred against people, like that I would say is upwards with like promoting hate and hate crimes and stuff like that. So maybe I'd be sort of on board with like, yeah, we should probably not have this person working at our company. Talk myself in a circle there. Wouldn't that make a historically accurate book or movie to be basically impossible to make? Yeah. Unless it's relatively recent. Like, you can make... Like, the closer you get to the present, the more easy it is to write historical fiction where you have characters that kind of make sense. Because their culture is, like, getting more and more similar to one that we can recognize. But even then, like, even in, like, the 1960s, your average person would be considered like an irredeemable bigot by today's standards. So, let's see. Thoughts on people trying to diagnose figures like Einstein with certain disorders, ADD, autism. Find it tiring since often it ties to essentialize a person to their genetics. Like, so like this is sort of like an issue actually in history, which is called psychohistory, and it's very controversial. There are some people who think that you can do it, or there's some people who can say like, oh, like sometimes these people make more sense if you understand that what's it called? If you understand that they showed symptoms of a certain neurodiverse positions and stuff like that. Like I was just listening to a sort of like a biography of arch-imperialists, white supremacist Cecil Rhodes, and that he had like a lot of like writings about what he was like as a kid showed him being sort of overwhelmed, overwhelmed with his like having issues socializing with people, and often becoming overwhelmed because of stimulation and things like that, which are like a lot of symptoms of autism, for example. But like, yeah, you can't like say, oh, Cecil Rhodes probably had autism and that's why he became an emperor why he became like a runaway capitalist who was like super into the imperialism of Africa. But like, you can certainly say, well, that might have been a thing, but it is, yeah, to not like, it is definitely, while saying that, it's also pretty imperative to try and not distill people down to psychiatric conditions and things like that, because people are complex, all of them, even people who have been dead for centuries. And so it's kind of, while it's interesting, and definitely for the sake of like understanding a person fully, it is definitely important to study. But honestly, it's unless you have a psychiatrist meet with the person, it's impossible to ever confirm it. And you can only have like, you know, certain degrees of certainty and things like that. When the Romans invade new territory, they'd take land and make the natives pay tribute, but otherwise they'd leave them to carry on their own way of life as they had before. Does that mean Roman imperialism was more ethical than modern imperialism when it comes to colonizers trying to micromanage the colonized lives and make them serve capital better? A little bit, yeah. Although there was I would say there was less like, you know, sacking cities and raping and killing everybody, but there was still plenty of that. During Q&A, someone asked a trans YouTuber I follow that they think the Supreme Court pick will mean for LGBTQ plus people. She said, I don't think things will get better in my life. I hope things will get better in my daughter's life. Do you think that's overly pessimistic? I mean, I think this person is around 40, and they think LGBTQ Americans are screwed for the rest of their life. I mean, I would say it's... I mean, I don't know. At this point, things are looking pretty grim on that front. The fact that, like, if this Supreme Court justice goes through is being interviewed right now, the possibility that gay marriage might become recriminalized is very real, and that's terrifying. More coming across by chance, Mexi Cold War, plus you had just started Tristan Won't Shut Up, and I just found Step Back. Wow, yeah, that's a lot of things. I also write for the Cold War. I've written one video for Kings and Generals, There's 4 more, but they haven't made them into videos yet. And I randomly wound up on a Philosophy Tube video and a Mia Mulder video not long ago. All right. Aren't sex therapists a thing? I don't know if sex therapy is a thing. If it is, so I usually think that it's not. It's pretty controversial, but I don't know anything. I don't know anything about it. You know, nuclear power is a cleaner alternative to fossil fuels in the long run. Yeah. Sure. I just don't think that. What's it called? Like electric ships that run on nuclear power? Sure. If that's a thing that you can do, then fine, go for it. But like, just something feels a little bit more unsafe about a ship having a fucking nuclear reactor on it. Aren't some aircraft carriers nuclear as well? That wouldn't surprise me. Makes them more sufficient at, or what's it called? Makes them more self-sufficient when they're at sea for long periods of time. Reminds me of a discussion about whether Emperor Heliogabalus was trans. Yeah, that's a thing. I have an idea to make a ship about, or to make a video about. Let's see. In the long run with nuclear... Yeah, the thing about, like... I keep getting this. I get this a lot. I get this, like, a lot on these streams, because everybody wants me to bend the knee and talk about how great nuclear power is. Which is fair, because there's, like, a lot of people out there who have a very unfair hatred of nuclear power based on unrealistic fears about it. But, like, there is, like... And my main thing about nuclear power right now is that nuclear power plants take like 10 years to build, and solar and wind energy is being developed so hardcore. It's becoming so much more efficient and so much cheaper that we're almost getting to, and so much faster to build, that we're getting to the point where the amount of times where nuclear power is truly the best option for providing energy for an area is becoming more or fewer and further between, and so I would say that that's like to me, like, it's just less of a good option, because it still produces some waste, but like that, like, you know, solar panels and wind turbines seem to be like very quickly becoming the preferred option for me. Is nuclear fusion realistic or just another tech bro dream? I mean, it's been 10 years away for like 40 years now. If they can, I mean, I think that at some point they're going to figure it out, because it is a form of thing. It is a thing that creates power in our universe. Like, the sun is a fusion reactor. It's just whether we can, and we have been able to create fusion. It's just like whether or not we can create fusion that that produces more energy than it consumes. Which, like, the French are investing shit tons into developing it. I think that it's a thing that we may figure out someday, but I don't think that anybody has a realistic timeline of when, because it's just so, it's still got, like, so many bugs to work out that, like, I think that it's further off than a lot of tech bros would say, but it's definitely a thing that is, to me, I think it's pretty reliably going to be a thing in our future. It's probably going to be, and then, like, you know, then the next thing after that is figuring out how to make antimatter, but that is a centuries away problem, to make antimatter in levels that we can, like, contain it and also use it. Alrighty, I'm gonna take a quick washroom break. So I'm just going to save the text of this real quick. Okay. be back in just a moment. I'm going to put on some music for you guys. Alrighty, I am back. Sorry about that. Just, nature calls, Alright. Should taking advantage of someone's phobias to upset and terrify them be a form of assault? Like, supposedly someone's deathly afraid of snakes and you put a rubber snake on their desk. Should that be a crime? A crime? Maybe not. A form of harassment. Definitely something that's, like, very bad, for sure. But, like, getting the police involved, maybe a bit much. Alrighty. How do they contain nuclear-powered subs? I mean, aren't they technically designed to shoot at each other? How is that now a massive environmental catastrophe waiting to happen? As far as I know, they're not designed to shoot at each other because basically nuclear submarines are created with the idea... They're not designed for, like, fighting, really. They're part of what's called the Trident system, which is, they actually have nuclear bombs on board as well. And they're designed to just be submarines that basically just wander around the oceans of the Earth all the time in a place where enemies can't detect where they are, that can fire a missile at a moment's notice so that nobody knows where all the missiles are. So they can't just, like, bomb the launch sites or anything like that. But also because every branch of the military wanted their own nuclear weapons. So, yeah. You're talking about missile subs. Attack boats are absolutely a primary anti-submarine system already. Well, I'm also getting to the edge of, like, my actual knowledge of things. So, yeah, so that's... I'm not exactly sure. I don't know. I feel like the U.S. military has sort of been designed so much lately with making things like submarines that are not designed to be fired back because they don't go to war with countries that have their own submarines anymore. They just bully small, underfunded countries now, which, yeah, in like a war where like actual things can like happen, like that will definitely become an issue. Okay. Let's see. Is Trump a black swan? That's, I don't know, socialists have been predicting a Donald Trump-like figure for ages. But at the time it happened now, I mean, I think that for a lot of people it was a black swan, for sure. Oh, hey, Laura is here. That's awesome. Um, hydrogen-powered cruise ships? Maybe. Aren't helium blimps a lot safer? Yeah, but helium is at a premium right now. And I can't remember what the reason was that the Hindenburg, for some reason, needed to use hydrogen instead of helium. I can't remember what the logic was on that. Blimps are slower, the planes, but still faster than sea ships can go over land. Yeah. Airbus was kicked around a bunch. Has just kicked around a bunch of hydrogen airliner concepts. They're harder than kerosene in terms of fuel density, but a long way from unreasonable. Yeah. Semi-rigid airships, not blimps that are technically steerable balloons. Okay. Can we just make our own helium by slapping two hydrogen atoms together? It requires a we don't know how to do that at a scale that is actually feasible. Is the problem? Like you need like a lot of power. Like you need like a what's it called? Like a large hadron collider to just make like one atom at a time, and you would need like gallons of the stuff. This is why we're actually like running out of helium because we can't produce it, and it's not made on Earth. It's made on the sun. And so it's actually like we're actually like running out of helium. It's actually like a serious problem because we need it for like MRI machines and stuff like that, but we're like wasting it on fucking balloons. What's the most promising way to suck CO2 out of the atmosphere besides tree planting? My guess would be reforestation. Yeah, reforestation, as you said. But like there's this whole thing of like sowing iron in the seeds or in the ocean to make algal blooms that absorb carbon dioxide and then fall to the bottom of the ocean. There's just like fucking burying carbon dioxide in the ground, like making like artificial trees that filter carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and then just pump the excess carbon dioxide into the ground or condense it to make calcium carbonate to make like, you know, things for like making like Tums and stuff like that. But all that is very expensive technology, and some of it's only like, you know, only exists on blueprints. Could you build space habitats that the inhabitants are protected from solar radiation? I mean, theoretically, with modern technology, it would be pretty tough. But like, we can't really build a space habitat anyway with today's technology. But theoretically, I guess you could do so by like some examples are, some examples that people have floated are like building a space habitat inside of an asteroid. That's one way to do it. Or to have all of the habitat's water supply in like tanks that sort of like line the outside of the thing, and because water is apparently a pretty good radiation protection, and so you just have like all of like the water on the outside acting as like a radiation shield, which you then also use to run the colony. And then the other one is so that and like building them inside of asteroids are like the two that I've heard that are feasible, other than like, you know, us inventing some sort of sci-fi radiation shielding that doesn't exist yet. Wouldn't that damage people's self-esteem? Yeah. The shaming the meat would hurt people's self-esteem. But like, I think like what these people, while it's not perfect practice, what it does do is that it contains ego. And if there's one, and the thing is that like, it's directed in a direction too, because like if there's one thing that I think a society needs to fight off hierarchy and fight off like kind of the natural gravity of our brains towards fascism, is that like young men need to have their egos checked regularly, and that's kind of like a thing they do. There's probably a better way to do that, but that is the way that a certain society did it. And that like what it does show is that there just is like a predilection towards hierarchy that exists in the human brain that we need to be vigilant about countering at all times. That's sort of like my take on those things. So we have an instinct to form hierarchies, but also an instinct to prevent hierarchies from happening. I don't know if we have an instinct to prevent hierarchies from happening. Usually we have it. We have an instinct to, but we just that like what must have happened is that in early pre-farming societies, that was like hierarchies were dangerous when everybody had to work, and that egalitarian societies were just the like kind of like through selection or whatever, the ones that survive best in the sort of conditions of life that existed before farming, because yeah, everybody had to work in order to make everything function. So my guess, and things like family units couldn't really be a thing because people died so often. So like that was like I think that was like probably the reason why. Native Europeans have much more power than the people that are moving to Europe. That's for sure. Good evening, Tristan. How's Quebec? You may say Ontario isn't Quebec, but I would beg to differ. Wow. We have a lot of COVID going on right now, but now the government's refusing to lock down. So that's fun. That's cool and good. All right. Where do you stand on the political compass? Now, there's a good question. The political compass is, I think, it's poisoned a lot of online discourse, and it makes people have a very wrong idea about how things like de-radicalization and politics function. Like anybody who thinks that politics functions on sort of a Cartesian plane really doesn't understand the way that people's politics actually work, and that politics are actually, like if you ask any random person about their political beliefs, they're not going to follow a specific point on a Cartesian plane like the political compass is. They're going to have contradictory opinions. They're going to have things that they're going to be inconsistent because human beings are generally inconsistent creatures. And they're just going to have all sorts of things all over the place. And so there's not, and also deciding what is right or left outside of like economics, like being racist, where does that fit on the left-right authoritarian libertarian spectrum? I don't know. It doesn't really work. And so like that's like a thing that that I, you know, and also so like what this does, unfortunately, is it makes a lot of people think that you can like de-radicalizing fascists and stuff like that. I plan on making a Tristan Won't Shut Up video about this, so I have put some thought into it. That like you know, if you convince people that capitalism is bad, then you have brought them over to the left and you have solved all the problem. You have de-radicalized them from being Nazis or whatever. But like if they're still like, if they still harbor, you know, racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic positions, then they're not really friends, even if they are like, you know, if they do acknowledge that capitalism is bad and that we need healthcare. So in many ways, a lot of people, like I get a lot of shit from people. Like I get like friends who message me to say I should stop like shit talking. Like a good example that comes out, I should stop shit talking Vosh because he gets people out of the radical right. And I was like, yeah, well, like the people he brings out of the radical right are like racists who think that that we should have healthcare. And so they end up being like, oh, okay, like they're still using racial slurs, they're still being bigots. And I'm like, okay, are they really friends of ours at this point? Have you really de-radicalized them as long as they're like against capitalism? And I was like, no, not really. And so like I feel like that political compass thinking is part of why that's happened. What are your thoughts about the right-wing plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan? Fucking terrifying, and the fact that it's not front page news everywhere is also is like possibly even more terrifying. And that I probably should do something about. Like I should probably make a YouTube. I think I might make a step back video about militias because I've been to Oklahoma City and I kind of want to make a video about the Oklahoma City bombing and talking about the militia movement today. It might be a good continuity of things. Okay. Do you think we can achieve communism without a transition state? I think that we need to. Whether or not we can is yet to be determined because we haven't really tried in a significant way. But I feel like if we're going to move towards a stateless society, create a transitionary state will, in the end, do more to impede the process towards getting rid of states because states have a habit of being self-perpetuating hierarchy machines. Making a state that is designed to eliminate the concept of states feels like a thing that will never succeed. Good example, look at this country called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics that was supposed to be a transitionary state towards communism, but instead became a totalitarian society that became more and more centralized and unable to respond and less democratic over time. I would say less and less democratic, but it became like... it just like never really made much progress in the let's do more democracies direction. Why did ancient and medieval people have more holidays than us? Because they probably worked more hours during, or I don't actually. It was like, what's it called? It was like their primary social thing. Like I feel like. Because for us, holidays now mean time off work and time and a half pay, that holidays have started to disappear because if you have to pay workers more and the government has to approve of every holiday, they're going to make them pretty sparse. As you know, in America, many of the most beautiful parts of the royal countryside are predominantly populated by conservatives, while progressives tend to group in cities. How common is that in Canada? It's pretty common in Canada. Could egalitarianism be considered more stable / natural / intuitive than hierarchy because egalitarian societies stay that way by using things like shame, but hierarchies are sustained using violence? Yeah, I would say that. I would say that is a thing. The vast majority of human history, there were no countries, there were no states, there were no governments per se. And society was pretty egalitarian compared to once you get the advent of agriculture. So, yeah, it's not a bad take. Let's see. If gay marriage became decriminalized, then we'd be witnessing the end of America for sure. I mean, do you mean recriminalized? Is that like an autocorrect issue or something? Because, I mean, it has been decriminalized for the better part of a decade now. Oh, yeah, there's the correction down there. Is it problematic that in TNG and DS9 we're told that life on Cardassia has actually got materially better after they went fascist? I feel like it's buying into the BS idea that fascists are evil, but at least they're efficient and get stuff done. Maybe. I don't exactly know too much about that aspect of it. My guess it's like them trying to just talk about like the way that people try to excuse Hitler for the Autobahn and stuff like that. Don't forget, Tristan, you voiced Ant-Man in Jose's Secret Empire video. which casting you as Nick Spencer, Scott Lamb was pretty perfect casting. That's awesome. Yeah, he gave me a list of characters to choose, and I chose Ant-Man because I like Ant-Man. If industrialization had taken place in Islamic countries first, would polyamory be more mainstream earlier in our society, or is that orientalizing? Yeah, because the thing about some what's it called? Some parts of the Middle East practiced polygyny. That is true. Typically, though, it was only like very wealthy people, like monogamy, or polygyny anyway, was like a thing that really, as the Quran says, you really can't have more than one wife unless you are rich enough that you are able to care for multiple wives. So it would be more of a thing in like the aristocracy or something, but for the most part, like, it's a practice that largely like became less of a thing once there was not a monarchy anymore. Whether that's European influence or just like them following Islamic, principles, is up to you. Let's see. I'm just reading for questions. Sorry, I get distracted when I'm trying to read what everyone's been saying. Nuclear fusion is always 3 years from now. Yeah, I think the joke about nuclear fusion is that nuclear fusion has been 10 years away for like decades. Is it bad that I recognize like half the songs in the background? It just means you like synthwave, which is, that's kind of the music I'm into too. I'm having a synthwave like moment right now. Let's see. Apparently, before the last debate, Harris's advisors prepped her on how to talk in a way that wouldn't upset the racists and misogynists in the audience. Thoughts on the Democratic Party feeling that they need to do that? Honestly, at this point, I don't know if it is a thing that she would have needed to done. I honestly like maybe that was a thing she needed to do in the way that, because of how America's going, especially because the Democrats are trying so hard to appeal to conservative, kind of conservative leaning centrists, which means you have to make them feel comfortable in their sort of racist takes, which is not great. Is democracy effed? I mean, I don't think democracy is effed. I think that what we're learning is that the society that we have been calling democracy for the longest time is anything but. The idea that choosing one delegate to make decisions on your behalf once every 4 years based on a very limited size of applicants is not very democratic. I think that's the thing that we probably are going to be learning soon. Hydrogen is much lighter than helium, but hydrogen explodes, and helium does not. Let's see. Helium is a byproduct of nuclear fusion on Earth. Or nuclear fission. I don't think it's a byproduct of nuclear fission. Maybe fusion, but we still don't have fusion reactors are huge and extremely expensive to make, and so even then, and many times they're more scientific experiments than they are like actual industrial products at the moment. So I doubt it. There's a reason that we're like considering going to the moon just to get more helium. Scrambly, thank you for following. Welcome to the Orc Gang. All right. The other day, the legal podcast said that the cops who shot Breonna Taylor technically broke no laws. Instead of trying to take them to take the cops and losing, we should be focused on reforms that will make no-knock warrants illegal. Thoughts on that? I mean, you could do that, but there's also the big issue of the fact that somebody died and is getting no justice, which I think is a thing that is bad. It is a bad thing that is happening. It does seem that your legal podcast guys do seem to want to have very slow and incremental change that results in years of a lot of police officers just getting away with murder with no punishment and them being okay with that. That's not good. Do you think Hillary would have won if she was a man? I don't know. The Democrats have a lot of, whatchamacallit? The Democrats have a big hump to overcome with the whole electoral college. Like, I'm not exactly sure how many more votes she would have gotten if she were a man, and if it would have turned the election, because most of the reason she lost had to do with, like, no campaigning in Michigan and stuff. Or not campaigning in Wisconsin. Like, I think that she was the exact opposite of the kind of candidate that was needed in the 2016 election when everyone was really fed up with the way the system works. And the Democrats decided to not listen to that. So in many ways, I think that it has to do with many more, like, she was a flawed candidate from the beginning, but also on top of that, the way that they ran the campaign was like this sort of weird data-driven idea that didn't really work out in practice. Guess who is sick and quarantined? Oh no! Yes, give them psilocybin for their ego. Death to all egos. Alrighty. Been reading Zen's People's History. He mentions how historians often mention Columbus's crimes in passing instead of outright ignoring you. What's your take on this? Like, what are examples of people mentioning terrible events in passing to downplay play them that you can think of? Very oftentimes we he committed genocide, but then fairly often, like, if you're teaching American history, Columbus is a very small part of the story, and his crimes are typically, like I said, they're kind of like an afterthought. They're part of the lecture, but not like they typically don't talk about him running a child sex ring or slavery, but talk about how, or that they'll mention that he practiced slavery and captured people, but not mention that he basically eliminated an entire island's indigenous population, or the extent of how bad the crimes went. Alrighty. Can solar radiation move around corners? I've always hoped that we could build ring worlds one day, but they have to be open to space on two sides. What would that radiation problem... the thing is, I think radiation actually doesn't go around corners because it's like little microscopic bullets of neutrons, which, like, you might be able to deal with that. Okay. Never stop shit-talking the lib asshole claims to be a leftist. Oh boy. Alright. How does a stateless society protect disabled people? Thing is, like, I would say, like, this is like the kind of thing that people don't realize about anarchist or stateless ideas, is that just because there's no state doesn't mean there's no government, or it doesn't mean that there's no, like, organization at all in society. If anything, a anarchist society would have a lot more organization. It would just be more local and more focused on local participation. And in many ways, I feel like you could have more protection for disabled people because they would have more ability to participate in their own like policies that affect them, instead of like a few politicians at the top. And I think that that might be the solution you're going for. On top of that, without capitalism, a lot of the incentives towards distance, like, what's it called? Because capitalism puts such a premium on like people basically just being instruments to generate profit, that devalues people with disabilities. And I think that in many ways you could you would alleviate a lot of that if you just got rid of the capitalist order. Thank you, lolcookie2. Thank you for following. Welcome to the Orc Gang. How long can a totalitarian state last? Can a boot stomp on a human face forever? I do think that there's always going to be challenge. There's always going to be limits. There's always going to be a pushback for sure. I don't want to be that guy, but isn't de-radicalization a slow process? We can't expect people to be perfect overnight. I hope consistent positive influences can change a person's behavior over time. Sure. It's just that, like, fairly often there's this, like, idea floating out in the zeitgeist that that if somebody just watches enough debates on Twitch, that they'll all of a sudden be de-radicalized. And that, and fairly often you find that the people who, like, became de-radicalized from, like, the alt-right because they watched a Vosh stream or something end up being, like, pretty shitty reactionaries that just no longer have issues with, like, or who no longer worship capital. And unfortunately, de-radicalization is a process that involves interpersonal communications and one-on-one discussions that takes a long period to do. And just saying, oh, you don't like capitalism now, but you're still racist. Well, you can now join the club. Welcome aboard. Because you're basically going to be saying that you value the guy who's still racist but believes capitalism is bad over the, like, people of marginalized groups who are already in your movement, who are already supposed to be your allies. And you're making it more dangerous for them. What do you think would be the first good step going out into a stateless classless money society? Like, what needs to be done? Just abolish governments and see how that works out? I'm more of, like, a dual power person. I think that we need to be finding a way to make parallel structures to organize society and make, like, make the functions that the government should be doing function on an equitable level, just not using the government to do it. Because fairly often a lot of activism gets, especially like liberals seem to think that activism boils down to different levels of volume of asking the government pretty please to do something. And, like, as an anarchist, I would say what we should be doing is just doing the thing that we want to do instead. And if we can, like, set enough of that up, maybe we can, like, start to make the state a little bit more relevant. That's, like, my That's my thought anyway. Didn't people used to spend most of the wintertime not working because it was too cold to do anything? Yeah, there is a sort of like hibernation that would happen. I don't know too many details about it, but it was a thing I've heard about, yeah. What is a crime? Oh boy, violation of social cohesion, or a violation of somebody's rights. It's a good question. Bigger question than I can answer in just like a few seconds here. You think that Biden and the Dems want Trump to win? They benefit from him most financially and politically. I think that they genuinely don't want him to win, but also I'm not that conspiratorial, but their solutions to beating him are based on the fact that they are very, very they're very blind to working class people, because none of them, like all of them, come from like wealthy upper middle class backgrounds at the very lowest. They don't understand why people are voting for Trump, and because they don't understand why, they really can't make any progress in getting people to do so. Trump is luckily fucking the football so hard that he might just give Biden the election anyway. All right. Do you think that instead of getting rid of gay marriage outright, they might just make it harder to get a marriage license if you're gay? The Legal Podcast said separate but equal gay marriage. Oh, I could totally see that happening. Polygyny was also quite common in the pre-Islamic Middle East. Yeah, that is true too. That's why I need to get a producer at some point so that they can get the questions for me. The Orc Gang, yes. Long story. I have a tattoo of an orc on my back. Sort of speaks to it. Alright. Doesn't most of the helium on Earth come from nuclear decay, like alpha particles? As far as I know, I think someone just pointed out that it comes from, like, natural gas caves. Listening to It Can Happen Here, any other podcast suggestion? I'm really liking I Don't Speak German. I think that's a pretty good podcast. Really depends upon what you're into, but also Bad Faith is a newer podcast that I'm pretty big fan of. Those are two that just come off the top of my head. If and when the U.S. gets a real leftist president, will we ever see a committee for un-American activities that targets white supremacists and law enforcement? Oh, we can only hope, but my guess is that day is a long way off. Radiation is complicated. It technically does. But in the same way that protons can become waves or matter based on interaction. So yes, but not necessarily being of use. Alrighty. just scrolling. Suppose there was another Earth, but getting there and back would cost like a few hundred kilometers into space each time. Would it be cost effective to exploit the resources there? Maybe. I could definitely, if you could like just go there and not build a habitat and just like live and set up farms and shit, I definitely think people would go. Whether it would be cost effective to like go there and back regularly, maybe not. But really depends upon like what's it called? I think like doesn't something cost like $10,000 a kilogram, right? Like that's how much it costs to break the gravity well right now. And if there is something like gold and platinum, like I don't know, how much is gold worth a kilogram? Like right now, gold is $61,000 a kilogram USD. So if you were to like start a gold mine on the other side, you could definitely make money sending that back to Earth. You'd tank the price of gold, but it's a thing you could do. What are some issues that libertarians and anarchists can work on together? I feel like most people are right-wing, so what can we work on together? I don't know about right-wing libertarians, because they basically want capitalism forever. Maybe just getting the state to stop creating more problems than it solves, but not focusing on deregulation, focusing on, like, the open, like, what's it called? Open corruption towards moneyed interests. Something makes me think that might be something that we could work together on. What if instead of packing the court, we just say they have to retire after 20 years? That would get Thomas off the court right away. This is what Shahid Buttar wants to do. I mean, that is an option. I feel like there's a lot of options. You have to choose which one is the best right now. You had no idea you were tattooed, Tristan. Yeah, I only have one tattoo. It's on my back. And it's a pretty big one. It was drawn by Scutch, which I am pretty proud of. Let's see. Citations Needed. That's another really good podcast, yeah. Let's see. We're doing on time. Okay. Are you just listening to a soundtrack from Drive? No, I'm listening to a like what's it called? Synthwave / vaporwave playlist on Spotify. Holy shit, I'm caught up with the chat. That never happens on Mondays. Hello, everybody. Is it bad that I want Harris to take over as president early on? Just because I know it'll anger and terrify white supremacists? Like, I don't think she'll be particularly more progressive, but I know it'll piss off the people I hate. I mean, that's sort of like why conservatives vote for people like Trump, because it triggers the libs. It's not exactly a healthy impulse, I will say. Gangster capitalism, I have never heard of that one. Everyone is petty and spiteful. Well, to different extents. Everybody is scared for their own stability and sort of like trying to make their way in the world. And the world is getting harder and harder to make your way in. And so I think a lot of people are getting, sort of getting turned off that way. How is free love supposed to be set up? Like, could I still do a religious marriage under that? Well, that's the thing. Look at the first word of the thing. It's free love. So it's for you to practice love however you want to. If that's a religious marriage, then go for it. That's sort of like the idea. Just a warning: if you're in Japan, you should not show your tattoo there. Yeah, I know. I mean, I think they're used to white tourists having tattoos, but I know that tattoos are associated with like gang members there and stuff like that. But that's more of like a whatever. It's less of a thing than it used to be. It's also used fairly often to discriminate against the indigenous people of Hokkaido, the Ainu people. So it wouldn't be worth it just to spite Ben Shapiro or whatever. I would prefer if Harris took over from Biden because even though she sucks, she's at least more progressive than Biden is. Like most Democrats, I think, at this point. Didn't Harris throw a lot of non-white people in prison for cannabis possession and stuff? Yeah, she was the top cop of California. Having a tattoo triggers Japanese pencil sharpeners. Well, no, it's like because like the Yakuza get tattoos, it gets, and because like there's a stronger cultural taboo against getting tattoos in Japan than in like the West. There is like a stronger like, oh dear, you have a tattoo, that's kind of messed up, especially in like places like bathhouses and stuff like that, which are a more common thing over there. So it's like, but like oftentimes, like I think it's becoming pretty well established that like in Japan, like white tourists have tattoos, and they sort of are getting over that in more or less a way because of they have money. Should schools have the right to make teachers do work at home? Whenever I go with my brother, he's always stressing about paperwork. I mean, I would prefer not, but that is be best if they had, a work day every week that they could just do the works that they need to do. Because, yeah, making people work from home is not fair. Unless it's a work from home job. But, I mean, like, yeah. They teach for so many hours of the day, and then they have that kind of work for the rest of the day. I don't know. Teachers do get paid too little for way too much work. Define shite like have... Oh, you're talking to someone else, I think. Check out this dumpster fire. Oh, boy. Alright, I just realized it's 2 o'clock, so... we should probably go visit somebody. Let's go see who's on Twitch. Who's streaming right now? Who is making stream? There's Kevin Logan. Does Kevin Logan have... Kevin Logan's stream hasn't started yet. He's just at the splash screen. Alright. Time for our old pal, Rocketansky. Alright, let's do this. So yeah, for everybody who's here, I'll be around tomorrow night. As you guys all know. So everyone, take care of yourselves and each other. And I'll see you guys tomorrow night. Peace.